Hey everybody, welcome back to the whiteboard. Just in time for the end of Q3, early Q4, we are going to talk about a topic that is every CMO, founder, owner's favorite thing to ask for coming into the holiday season: influencers. So this entire video started when a very good friend of mine texted me about doing an influencer campaign for her brand. And she was wondering if it makes sense to contract a very well-known influencer in the culinary space for Q4 to do a series of posts. She shared over some information about this influencer. This particular one has about 2.5 million followers and pretty hefty following. And then she was one other one that she was considering was about 1 million followers. So this is kind of what I told her, and this is how we broke it down and what she's going to end up doing. So figured I would just share it because I thought it was a really interesting thing and a different way to think about this problem. So first of all, most of the time, brands want the mega influencer. They want the influencer with a huge following that is really well known because that is the sexy, cool, fun thing to do. It makes headlines, it makes other brands jealous. It does all the right things for your own ego. And for the sake of simplicity, I have defined mega as anything with more than 1 million, any account with more than 1 million followers. And our team was able to pull some pricing. The average cost, this does not mean that every single thing is this, but this is the average cost, about $100,000 for 3 posts from a mega influencer. Now keep in mind, some of these are more, some of these are less. This doesn't take into account timing, but general good initial point in the ground. If you want a very large influencer to do a series of 3 posts for your brand, expect to be at about 100K for those 3 posts. Again, some of these are likely very low. If you're going to Kim Kardashian, it is much more than that. And if you have maybe a less monetized or under monetized 1 million follower account, it may be less than that. But in general, that's what you should expect. We also pulled some data on the follower to impression ratio for the average post. So what this basically means is if you have 1 million followers, on average, you're getting about 100,000 to 250,000 views on each post for that account. Pretty simple, right? Basic influencer math. And then for what we call a portfolio, which are basically micro or nano influencers, we assumed every one of these was less than 25,000 followers. The average cost here, about $1,000 for a 3-post series for a smaller account. Some of these are much smaller. Some of these are even free. There are some accounts that are in this range that will do stuff for free because they're just trying to build their account, etc. Average of 3 posts. And then the follower to impression ratio here is actually higher. It's about 20 to 40%. Again, pretty standard, pretty normal. We should all more or less expect that. So the big question I asked her, and the big question that if your client is asking you, should we do this? Here's the question. What are you solving for? And there's a different answer based on what you're trying to do. So let's get to that. Number 1, if you are solving for prestige, for your ego, or for something that enables other activations, just admit it now and go with the mega influencer. Be really straightforward with you. That's going to get you a lot more buzz. It's going to spawn discussions potentially on Instagram or TikTok or X or YouTube. It's going to have reach and a halo effect. If you are going for performance sales efficiency, this portfolio strategy with smaller influencers is likely the better play. And here's the math, right? This isn't just a theoretical discussion. This is a math discussion. So we've taken all these assumptions right here and actually penciled them out into what you should expect. And if you are considering an influencer campaign, you should do this math, right? Number 1, mega, we have 1 million followers. We have a 20% follower to impression rate. That's near the high side of what you should expect. 3 posts, put it all together, that gets you 600,000 impressions. And I assumed no overlap. So I assumed that you reached a different segment of this audience each time. That is a bad assumption, but it is an assumption nonetheless. About a 2% click rate, a 1% conversion rate, and $100 AOV for this brand gets you 120 sales and about 12,000 in revenue. On your $100,000 investment is a ROAS of 0.12 just on the influencer post. Now there is more to this, and we're going to get to that in a second. If you do the same math for the influencer portfolio, you have to factor in one thing, and that is the overlap rate between different influencers. Because while each of these nano influencers has a much smaller following, odds are that several smaller accounts targeting, for instance, the culinary space are going to have appeal to the same kind of people. So there's going to be some overlap between followings from culinary influencer 1, culinary influencer 2, and culinary influencer 3. Those are not uniform and you have to model those out, but what I did was took an average for 50 top influencers selected off of SparkToro, and it came in just under 20%. So 20% it is. And basically what we do is just assume a 20% overlap between each and every influencer, 50 total influencers in the portfolio, 3 posts on average each, and a 30% right in the middle of that 20 to 40% follower to impression ratio gets you 900,000 impressions. 3% click-through rate, 2% conversion rate, same 100 AOV, gets you 540 sales or about $54,000 in revenue. On a $50,000 total investment, 50 influencers, $1,000 on average each, you have a ROAS of 1.08. So here's the things that you have to consider now, right? And why some of this happens. One is with a mega influencer, there is diminishing marginal returns and diminishing marginal reach. The bigger the account, the lower the percentage of the followers that each individual post will reach. You can see this for yourself. Just go to a large account, see the average number of impressions, compare it to the number of followers, calculate that ratio. Go to a smaller account, do the same thing. You'll see the smaller account has the same ratio. That's very intentional. It's because those smaller accounts tend to be more niche-y, more community-oriented, more groupy, right? It's just a tighter community. That's what happens. Now the solve for this is either we go with smaller accounts, or if you have a mega influencer and you have a mega budget, you promote this post. You force distribution of the post to the full audience, which is 100% something you can do and something that can very quickly turn this from what looks like a loser into an amazing piece of content. But that requires the promoted strategy to actually be a much larger component of your budget than the influencer. And a lot of brands candidly don't have a $2, $3, $4 million budget to deploy in Q4. They want influencers, they want to understand what works, but they don't have the balance sheet that can support that kind of initiative. And if that's you, then overcoming diminishing marginal reach is likely going to require smaller accounts because they are not subject to it as much. Second issue, concentration risk. When you have one mega influencer that you have given a very large sum of money to, a significant portion of your return is dependent on their performance. Should anything happen, and we live in a time when anything that potentially could happen usually does happen on any given day, should that coincide with the day of your campaign, you're donezo. It's terrible and it's tragic, but that's how this works. If your new hot influencer campaign launched the other day when Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce announced their engagement, RIP. Was great knowing you. That was an awesome $100,000, but the entire internet was not talking about you. You're done. Again, the solve for this is either we promote it so that we can keep it in, or we distribute over a longer period of time, which is usually a portfolio strategy, so that you are less subject to individual daily craziness. And then the third is the relevance and returns, right? If you are counting on this influencer campaign itself to drive returns, then you need max relevance. Big accounts typically don't have super highly personal relevance to their followings. Smaller accounts tend to do that, right? A niche account talking about sourdough bread starters is going to have much more appeal for a sourdough starter kit than a very generic, Notorious Foodie account. Is Notorious Foodie cool? Yeah, he's really cool. But if I'm trying to sell sourdough starter kits, the sourdough starter person who just talks about sourdough all the livelong day is going to have more relevance, likely a higher click-through rate, a higher conversion rate, because that community is just so relevant to the product that I'm selling. So you either have to amplify and diversify, which means once you get into these communities, you either amplify your mega post to those niche communities, or you diversify into them by having smaller creators support your account. So all that being said, if you are trying to do an influencer campaign, you probably should explore it, but you should consider, because in many cases, this is the right path, going smaller, not bigger. The smaller campaign has a portfolio effect. So you have some small accounts that are going to underperform, some small accounts that are going to overperform. But in aggregate, you're going to have likely a better and more stable performance. Secondly, look at the volume of creative you're getting. In this micro nano portfolio, you're getting 50 influencers, each making an average of 3 posts. That's 150 pieces of creative for $50,000 plus distribution. Assuming you negotiate in the rights to promote those posts, which you absolutely should, and with a smaller influencer, most brands can because you have leverage over them, you have now offset part of that cost right off the bat because you don't need to make or pay for as much creative. So even if we assume that the cost of a single creative asset is $200, well, all of a sudden, we've got 150 of those. That's a significant savings, right? We're 5 is 1,000. Yeah, you're 30 grand. Almost 60% of your investment is covered immediately by the creative that you got with a very low. So that's a huge advantage. Now, the third part is a lot of your smaller creators will allow you to use the post for much longer. You have much longer and much more lenient usage rates. Obviously, you need to negotiate those. But smaller creators tend to be much more flexible about those things. On the flip side, if you are a bigger brand or a brand with a larger budget, the mega influencer as a crown jewel that's really just a support to the rest of the campaign makes a ton of sense. If you get, for instance, on the cooking side, Notorious Foodie or Susie Vital or any of those other people to do something, that's awesome. But you need to have the media around it so that you can take that content and amplify it across different channels, have a PR campaign going, leverage it into your traditional media, leverage it into your email, right? Leverage it into your Meta account. You need to be able to do that, because if you can do that, this math matters less because you will overwhelm this math with the halo and the lift that you get from your existing distribution infrastructure. But if you don't have that, or if you don't think you can build that, the mega influencer on their own is not going to carry sales in the way that you had hoped. That is overwhelmingly the finding of many, many brands we've talked to. Mega brand with amazing supporting cast can be a great strategy. If we don't have the great supporting cast and we don't have the budget, the nano, micro, small influencer portfolio strategy almost always performs better for brands that are trying to grow and scale, either B2B or B2C. So if you're thinking about a campaign for this quarter, for next quarter, do the math, ask the big question of what you're trying to achieve, and then pick the right approach. Neither of these is right, neither of these is wrong. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you have from a resource standpoint to support it. Talk to you next week.